Beyond X's and O's podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are really excited for our second guest on our podcast. This person was Coach of the Year last year in Division 8 in 2019. He's the head coach of Kipp Academy High School. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Rabbit.
Hey, Anthony, it's awesome to be here. I was telling you before, it's an unenviable task following the great Serge Clivio, but I'm really proud of you. This is an awesome avenue for, I think, so many coaches, young, new coaches, and veteran coaches to just get a glimpse of what coaching is like. And I just, even in that first episode alone, learned so much just from that, 45 minutes of Serge. So I think what you're doing is great, and I'm real proud of you. I'm happy to be here.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I know, and Serge is a tough guy to follow, but there's no other person to follow him but you, as far as I'm concerned. So, what a lot of people don't know is, yes, he was Division 8 Coach of the Year last year, but he also 3 years ago started the football program at Kipp Academy. There was no football program in existence when he came over to that school and became a teacher. And to me, I just think it's absolutely amazing of within a 3-year window, he has grown so much in his career. But I think it's an amazing story that he has to tell about how he built a program from scratch. And, I'm curious on where do you begin to even start a task like that of creating a football program from scratch?
Yeah, it's funny, looking back at it 3 years later, and all the things that went into it. You kind of get lost on you until you kind of reflect back. And one of the first things that happened in my interview at Kipp was the principal at the time talked to me about how Kipp wanted football. The kids had been asking for football, and it just hadn't happened in the few years. And that was like one of the selling points for me to come over and teach there was like, I have an opportunity to help spearhead that.
Yeah.
And jumping right in with our athletic director, Anthony Grimaldi, is fantastic. He's one of the best young ADs, I think, in the state, if not ADs in general in the state. And we were told many times by certain people that it can't be done. You can't set a football team at Kipp. It's not going to work. And sort of our task was like to prove everyone wrong. And getting kids and families invested in the process was really important. We had kids sign petitions right off the bat and showed numbers, and we had upwards of 80 kids, signing up for football, saying they were interested in football.
That's great.
And a school administrator, once they see that, it's very hard to say no to getting the ball rolling when so many kids in a school of 450, so many kids are interested to say no to that. So, we went through the process. We talked to the MIA many times. Luckily for us, we knew a few coaches. I knew a few coaches in the Commonwealth Small, and Al Costabile was fantastic. I talked to him, and
great guy, great coach.
Great coach. I'm sure someone will be on this show at some point.
Yeah.
And he really pushed in the CAC meeting, even before we were MIA approved, to get us in a league. And that really helped us in the MIA portion, was having a league already established.
Right, having a home, yeah.
And we were able to push that. And like I said, our admins were great. Our principal, our director of schools, really supportive of the task, and they made it work for us financially, because you can imagine and I don't even know the entire financial situation of starting a football team.
Or do you want to?
They kept that away from me, I think, on purpose. Yeah. But after that, the process, talking to the MIA back and forth, and it took us about 6 months of back and forth, paperwork, and having certain higher ups in the school and the district sign things. We had an official. We announced it to the kids at pep rally. It was a surprise, and that's kind of how we started that program.
Yes, I mean, it's amazing, and I think the fact of just like the hard work that goes into that, and that's not even including the actual game of football. So just getting approved to be in a league and getting approved by the MIAA is a tall task in itself. So now you get the green light. What do you do next? I mean, obviously there's a zillion more things you still have to do. So how do you go about attacking it?
Yep. We didn't have a full preseason that year. By the time we got the notice, and by the time we were fully approved by the school, we were probably talking middle of March, April. So we didn't have a full typical off season that most football teams would have, right? Starting in potentially January, February, March, working through.
Right.
So the first thing we did, and I was lucky enough, and I know this is, I got lucky in this manner. I had 4 coaches in the building. who had played college football and or had coaching experience. So right off the bat, I was able to hire a coaching staff of coaches that I knew from that year, that I trusted, that had experience. One of my coaches was a defensive coordinator, is now the head coach at Gloucester. So we
Oh,
lost
wow.
him. So getting a coaching staff on board, and then getting kids to buy into not just being on the football team,
Hmm.
but also now buying into what it means to play a varsity sport, a varsity football, as you know, is even more different than other varsity sports.
Yeah.
And that was the big challenge, was trying to get our players ready, football IQ wise, because football was new for everyone at this level, and also physically getting them ready.
Right.
So that was our next task. Leadership, finding seniors who were in the building who had played football. Was we only had 2 players who had ever played football before in the school. So that was a daunting task to find leadership. It was slow to begin with, certainly. But once we found those players, got them in a groove of a couple workouts a week, we had about, like I said, 80 players, and we had to make some unfortunate cuts to players due to budget constraints and equipment. But when all was said and done, by August, we had 40 players looking to play varsity football that were as committed could be at that point.
And that's great. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you just told that, in about 2.5, 3 minutes. And I'm sure that was just months and hours and hours and hours and hours of work. So you make it sound like it was so easy, but I know for you, it's in knowing the type of person that you are, and just how you coach and how you are as a person, you want it to be the best for the kids as possible. And I think that's obviously something that Kipp saw in you as well. So you mentioned, getting these kids ready physically for the game of football, and you mentioned in finding leadership. How do you go about building a culture from scratch? I mean, the successful programs out there, their culture is amazing, between leadership councils and, kids hanging out and really getting together and working out together. So how do you go about building a culture in a brand new program?
I think it's 2-pronged. The first is, teach what you know, and coach what you know. And I was lucky enough to have coached under Coach Clivio for 6 years, and watching him grow that football culture at Arlington Catholic, even before obviously I got there, knowing the success, and knowing what kind of man he was, using what I learned from him for those years, but also sticking to my core beliefs and my core values. Because one of the things I guess I got lucky with, again, is I wasn't changing a culture. I wasn't coming in to try to usurp a culture. I was coming in to create, or help create, a new culture.
Right.
So in that way, I could literally start that from scratch with my vision, with the vision of the coaches and the vision of the school community. I stuck to those guns as much as I could. In the first year, it was very, very difficult, but just preaching to the kids, dedication, sacrifice, all the cliches that you talk about in football that are real and mirror in life, we used in our first year of the program. And I have to give so much credit to the kids in the program from year one, who bought into that right away. Because if there was no buy-in on whatever we were preaching, could be anything. If there's no buy-in, there may not be a program after year one. And our kids completely bought in to coming to practice, to giving themselves up for the game, for giving to each other as teammates, as brothers, creating a brotherhood, creating a community with cheering, and with our team managers and the school itself and in the community. And those are the things that we built the program on, and that's the thing those are the things we pride ourselves on now. And I think that's part of our success, 3 years later, is because we've kind of stuck to those values, and because we've had that buy-in by our kids.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what it is, right? Sticking to your guns it's hard that first year, because you're trying to say, nope, this is what it is. And that's not necessarily what might be popular amongst your players, amongst the team, but not sacrificing your morals and not sacrificing what you're trying to build as your culture it's so important. You mentioned with Serge, and the first year that I was at Allen the Catholic, it was all about getting alumni back on board. It was all about making these kids work for it. It was all about being fair, but also making them understand that this is the way it is around here, and this is what we want, and this is what you want, to build a culture that's something that you said, it mirrors life. It's outside of football a little bit, and that's what you're trying to build at the end of the day. So I know you've done a great job with that. And, I'm guessing first year, obviously you're teaching the game of football from scratch. So, you got your coaches on board, you had what you had of your off season, you get on the field day one. How are you beginning to implement offense and defense and teaching that, from scratch?
And I think that was the most difficult part of the journey. Believe it or not, was that first week, that first week and a half of camp. I think was the most difficult, because we came in with really no baseline for what our athletes knew, what they were physically capable of, right? That week was, when you talk about fundamentals and techniques and the basics of the game, most teams, I'm sure, of course you're always teaching fundamentals, but you really hone in on those first 3 or 4 days of non-padded practice on technique, on form, on, football IQ. It probably took us, 6 or 7 weeks to really hone in on that. And, if you look at our film from year one, we were very, very basic as far as what we put in offensively, what we could put in defensively, because we were working on those basics, on those fundamentals, because I think without them, and, I think if you go beyond that, when a team's not ready, that's not going to be good now, and it's not going to be good for the future. And it's a hard thing as a coach to do, because and for kids too, because you want to win, you want to put wrinkles in, you want to throw in more formations and more motions and alignments,
Right.
and throw in more blitzes on, as on defense. You want to throw some crazy blitzes in, and things like that. And for us to slow down, and it took a lot for us to kind of realize that, to slow down and really hone in on fundamentals, on technique, and on basic football IQ. We certainly took our licks in that first year because of it, but I think in the long run, that's what really helped us succeed, was building that base of knowledge that we could have done in the off season, but we didn't have that off season, so we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants in season,
Yeah.
close to the end.
Right. And as anything that starts up there's always its challenges, and there's always the things that go wrong that maybe you don't expect to. So let's kind of fast forward now. So you get through that season. I believe you were 3-7, 3-8, somewhere in that first year.
3-7 year one. Mm-hmm.
3-7. So, now you go into your first off season. Kids have obviously now seen the program for a year. Your attack's going to be different, because you didn't have that opportunity the first year to have a true off-season conditioning program. So how'd you go about building that? And I ask you a lot of these questions because I just think for any coach out there in any sport in high school, it's important to hear what you're saying, and that when you're trying to build something and build a program from the ground up. Last week we heard from somebody who did it over a long period of time. You're starting it from scratch. It's a little different, right? So it's great that other coaches are hearing these types of things that you're saying. And I think it's just amazing what you've put together in a short span, but to hear what you did year one is incredible. So how do you go into that off season now that you have a season under your belt?
And Anthony, it certainly takes a village. And like I said, without our AD, Anthony Grimaldi, our coaches in the school community, I don't know, regardless of wins and losses, if that would have transcended into year two, and how that would have looked. But we had a very young team. We graduated a few seniors after year one. We were very, very rising sophomore heavy. And probably over 25 of the 40 kids in the team were rising sophomores. So still very, very young. And we hooked up with the Lynn Fitness Center. We didn't have a gym yet, a fitness center of our own. And we hooked up with the YMCA, and we hooked up with Lynn Fitness Center. And Coach Kenny over there is great. And I would say 20-ish of our kids were dedicated to an off-season lifting program in year two, going into year two. We did some 6 a.m.s in the spring. That took a little bit more of a push than the lifting, as you can imagine.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
For coaches and for kids.
Oh yeah, it's all around.
And we were able to at least have some off-season meetings in the classroom, going over some X's and O's, and getting some football basics taken care of before camp. So we had tremendous buy-in, I thought, for year two of a program. We won our last 2 out of 3 games going into that season. So I think that helped to build momentum and to build more investment into the program for the next year. And like those sophomores, rising sophomores who had just been freshmen, really started, you could kind of see the seeds of a really special class, a really special, especially leadership. And those seeds were kind of planted, and as coaches, we kind of looked at each other like, this could be something. We could be onto something here if we can keep this group together. And that's how we could kind of entered year 2, was with a somewhat of a lifting program, somewhat of an off-season program, not the complete program yet. We hadn't gotten there yet,
Yeah.
with some investment and some high turnover of returning players.
And that's great. So I know, year 2, you jumped in the win column. I think you had 4 victories that year. So again, you're proving the product, right? You're starting this from scratch. Even 3 wins in year 1 of doing the work that you had to do to put this program together. And then, like you said, going out and just kind of really just trying to coach as hard as you can and give it all that you have with limited amount of time that you had or resources. What my question is now you made that jump into last year, and I got a firsthand look at you guys when we did some 7-on-7s, and we had a couple of conversations, and I was like, man, you got something here. You have some weapons, you have some athletes, you have some tough kids. So the writing was kind of on the wall going into that year. I mean, as a coach, I'm sure in the back of your mind, this is the group that you've been watching now a couple of years in your program. What was really the big jump into year 3? Because you guys 9-3, you were a game away from going to Super Bowl, right? In year 3 of the program, and then obviously a lot of your team was there were a lot of juniors. You had a lot of juniors, and you had a lot of younger guys playing too. So you do have a team coming back. What was that big jump, Jimmy?
Yeah, the big jump, and you mentioned it, like the athleticism was always there. Even from year 1, we had spectacular athletes. We had kids who really wanted to play. They were dedicated. But the one thing that was sort of lacking, as we said, was like the football IQ, the high school football IQ. And now that built, right? So now after year 2 in the program, running our spread offense, going through our 3-4 defense, and having 2 years in that system. And most of our kids at the varsity level, we had 7 or 8 freshmen 2 years ago playing. So
wow.
Now those kids are now rising juniors who have had 2 full years in the program.
Right.
They're starting to get it. They're starting to get it mentally. As you know, when you understand football, you can play a whole lot faster. You can play a whole lot tougher when the football IQ is there.
Absolutely.
So that was absolutely part 1, was our football IQ was exponentially better than it was in year 1. And again, our AD worked with Gronk Fitness, and we got a brand new weight room in our school.
Yeah.
And our kids were cranking it out in the preseason going into year 3. And so just our overall fitness and strength was there, and our football IQ was there. And like I said, it made my job, and maybe one day the kids will watch this and realize like how much easier they made my job by buying in, by investing, and being the leaders that they were. Because we didn't have to force kids into the weight room. We didn't have to chase kids down the hall. Hey, get in the weight room.
Yeah.
After school, and there was 25 kids in there. And that just, as a coach, made me proud, because they had completely 100% bought in. And, into the mental part, and now to the physical part. And that's where we went into our off season coming into year 3.
And just a side thing from football. I mean, the value of you and the amount of like respect in that school must have rose pretty quickly for you. I mean, I know you're not going to sit here and float your own boat about it, right? But let's be honest. I mean, you start a football program from scratch. You're building a culture. That culture can affect the school, especially when it's really positive. And it gets more buy-in. It gets more people wanting to come into the school, play in the program. And Lynn's huge, right? I mean, there's like 5 or 6 high schools in Lynn. So, you're also competing against other schools and for kids. So, I just think that's worth saying to you. And I think that's got to be the case in that school. But I know, back to the football stuff. I don't want you to get all embarrassed there, but and I know you're a spread guy. I mean, your offensive mind is pretty smart. So, I guess to me, if we're going to dig into the X's and O's here a little bit, is let's talk about your style of offense. Are you a run team that sets up the pass? Are you a quick pass team that tries to set up your run? Like, what's your process as a coach is what you think in your philosophies?
It's funny how quick I pivoted on this question. If you asked me when I first started as the head coach at Kipp, I would have said pass to set run, right?
Yeah.
First down passing and hopefully get 5 yards, and then the playbook's open, right? But I think, one thing I've learned is you have to play to the strengths of your players. And after year 2, we realized we had one of the, I think, and this is of course my bias, one of the best running backs in the state. Size and speed and dedication.
Oh,
And
yeah, he is a man. He is a very good player. Yeah.
and our offensive line in front of him are the five most dedicated weightlifters and players in the program that I've coached in quite a while. So to answer your question, right now we are run to set up the pass. We're still working. Our quarterback is a great athlete, young player, still working on that those reads and the short and pass game, long pass game. But we have great receivers who can get the ball quick with our screen game. Working on developing more of a play action game, but that's the great thing about spread is you can pivot however week to week, year to year, whatever your prerogative is. Best suited to your players, I think, and your competition, of course. But right now we're run to set up the pass. We have a special player and special players, and that's been our recipe for success the last year and a half.
And that's great. So obviously, teams are scouting you. They know that. They see that you're a team that can really pound the rock. They start loading the box, 8 guys, maybe even playing cover 0 and having 9 guys in the box, depending on what your spread receivers are or whatever. But I guess my question to you is do you change when you see teams kind of load up the box against you? What's your thought process into like, okay, I gotta make this team widen out a little bit. What do I do?
So my first thought really is to show my offensive line that film, and kind of get them pumped up for like the task ahead. They're gonna put 8 guys in the box. I'm gonna see what we can do and really move. But obviously it comes to a point where you're outnumbered, right, in the box, and you don't have enough guys to block the guys in the box. So we work on multiple formations. We work on motions to really widen out teams. One of the great things about our quarterback is we can go empty 3-by-1, 2-by-2, and get teams to widen a bit, and then we can hit them with the quarterback trap, things like that, some quarterback counters, because he's a really good weapon with his feet as well. So we utilize, like I said, motions, different formations to kind of outnumber point of attack. And our receivers are tough. They get involved in the blocking game as well. And our receivers coach, we tell them, if you can't block, you can't play.
Yeah, I mean, we coached together. That was, yeah, absolutely. That's all we told the receivers. You can't block, you can play, but if you can block, there's a spot for you to play.
That's right. And we can take the top off, and we have. I think our quarterback was 6 for 12 or something like that, and passes over 20 yards at the last half of the season when we really started to open up the offense. So he certainly grew, and we were able to take the top off the ball too. So, when teams see our receivers and they want to crowd the box, now we can say, okay, you're daring us to throw, and we should be able to, and we have been able to mix it up and throw the ball a little more because of the dedication of our receivers and our quarterbacks as well.
Awesome. And, I'm going to flip to my side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball a little bit, and I'm going to jump right into it. I mean, what kind of defense are you guys running? Are you a year to year kind of seeing your personnel, or do you have a system that you're selling your guys and buying in? This is what we are defensively, and this is how we're going to play.
Now, there was some defensive coordinator from Arlington Catholic that got me sold one year on the 3-4. So,
yeah, pretty smart guy.
But so we're a 3-4 team, and like same as with the offense, right? We've had conversations, and we've talked about the 4-2-5, and we've talked about moving to the 4-3 a bit, you and I. And I think you have to go on what your personnel is, and we have a nose guard who is completely dominant. And he has been since his sophomore year. He's getting some great looks at NESCAC schools, just the beginning for him. He's got four offers already to NESCAC schools. So not only is he an athlete, he's a terrific student as well. So in the 3-4, those 3 down linemen are super important.
Oh yeah.
And we're lucky to have a really big and strong front 3, and we have a linebacker who's also getting NESCAC looks in the middle, who can run like an outside linebacker, but hit like a middle linebacker. So I think just the personnel that we have and the speed that we have, the outside backer and D-back, I think is a perfect fit right now for the 3 front, with a lot of different, as you know, in the 3 front, you can be versatile. You can move things around, make it look like a 4 if you need to, and blitz guys off the edge and bring a safety up and whatever. So I think right now, we look at that and we say we are perfectly fit for, a 2-gap slanting, super aggressive pursuit of the football 3-4.
And that's great, and so in the league that you're in, would you, what type of style offenses are you seeing consistently? Because, being a 3-4 allows you to have, another guy standing up, moving around, rotating around. So are you seeing teams that are more spread, or have you been seeing teams that are, lining up on the center, whether it's I or whether it's, power I or 2x2 on the center? What type of offenses are you guys seeing in your league?
The league's very split. There's a couple spread teams, and we have a power I team, and we have a wing, single wing. I think Mystic Valley are in that single wing. So, of course, when teams are tight set like that, we adjust our defense. We bring more guys into the box. We play a lot of cover zero with the athletes that we have. So, in cover zero, you can bring your safeties way up into the box, and really crowd that box, even with the three front,
Mm-hmm.
slanting and blitzing. But also allowing our D line, playing that week to week basis, they can two gap. Our guys are good enough in our league to two gap much of the time and create havoc even against tight power fronts, pulling linemen, and our linebackers are athletic enough to fill and get into those holes. So, although we adjust into tighter fronts, we can reduce the front. We can eagle down and bring bigger guys into the box. We've been able to, for the most part, stick with the three down linemen for the most part when we've gotten into those situations with teams running those tight, heavy fronts.
Yeah, and so I think that defensively, it's all about gap control, and it's all about looking down and saying, making sure that every gap's accounted for, and that your middle backers are running to the football, but reading guards. I mean, if you have wide open shots to read the guards, they're the guards. Depending on the type of style you see, but typically under center, there's a lot of pulling. Okay, whether it's toss or whether it's running power or whether it's running bootleg out of it. So guards take you to play. So philosophy wise, 3-4 is always great, especially when you're going to see teams that are going to move their guards around a lot.
That's where the football IQ is so huge because you can have a great linebacker, but if he can't read a guard and gets washed, doesn't matter what front you're in if your linebackers aren't reading those guards. So, and I think that's a credit to our linebackers coach, Coach Lynch, and our defensive coordinators, really working on reading keys, and just drilling kids on. If you stare at the fullback in those situations,
Right.
you're gonna get lost. But if you stare at that guard, he'll take you to the ball and you can fill downhill. We've had highlight film hits and highlight film. Colleges have seen our linebackers play. And it's the scraping downhill that looks the best on film because not only are you showing your speed and your athleticism, you're also showing your football IQ by scraping down and following the pulse. So it
Yeah.
helps.
And so I heard you mention a little bit about your coaching staff earlier. I know one of your assistants early on had gotten the head coaching job at Gloucester, but let's talk a little bit about your coaching staff now because, one, I know the demand that you have as far as is being prepared. So obviously your success is shown in the record that you have. So what's your process in really trying to find football coaches that are good for the kids, not necessarily just good for the product, but good for the kids?
One of the years ago, one of the Gillette Stadium conferences, Coach Lee from King Philip was one of the coaches, one of the presenters there, and he was actually talking about building a coaching staff and a culture. And one of the things that sort of hit me that he talked about was coach with guys who you can go out and have a drink with. And I think he meant that literally and figuratively, right? Guys who you want to be around, right? Because as you know, in coaching, you're around these guys for a lot of hours
Yeah.
year round. And like I said, I was blessed to have many of our coaches in the building who right away were completely dedicated to the cause, to creating a culture, to creating a successful program, not just wins and losses, but like we're now seeing the fruits of our labor with our kids getting into some great colleges, some great NESCAT schools and beyond are offering a lot of our juniors already. So, we demand our coaches are just as dedicated as our players, and if not more. And, we're watching film, we're breaking it down together. We're talking about it at dinner, and we're meeting in the off season, whether it's my back deck or somewhere else. We're meeting and just talking football and always running ideas past each other. And, I think it's important for coaches to know as a head coach, you can disagree with your assistants. They can disagree with you. And that has to be something that happens, right? I think Serge said last week, you don't want a bunch of yes men, but when it comes time to being in front of the kids, that's when the front's united. And you don't step on each other's toes in front of the kids, but you have that discussion after practice. and guys who you're comfortable with having an argument with, and potentially football gets emotional and you can yell it out. And then once that argument's over, it's over and we're back to football, because we know that although we disagreed and had an argument, it's about the kids and it's about success. And that's what we've had with our football coaches over the last 3 years, has been a great rapport, a great relationship all year round. And just the understanding that what we're doing is what's in the best interest of our players, both on and off the field. And that's, you build a player's culture, but you also have to build a coaching culture. And again, like I said, with our kids, I've been blessed with coaches who have been just as dedicated as I have. And again, it makes my job a lot easier when you can surround yourself with people and men and teachers who are just as dedicated as you. And they certainly have made my job much easier.
And I think that's a testament to you, because, I think the hardest thing when you become a head coach is you're worried about everything. I mentioned last week about how you're worried about boosters and especially all the stuff that you're dealing with, and parents, and dealing with kids in school, and dealing with your scheduling, and dealing with equipment issues, and dealing with everything that you'd have to order. But then on top of that, it's the product too. And so I think it's a testament to you that, you have clear expectations. And as a head coach, sometimes head coaches, maybe they're not as clear with their expectations, where they have so much on their plate to begin with, but clearly not an issue with you, with your program growing every single year, your product on the field getting better and better, but also off the field. I mean, you're mentioning a lot of kids going to a lot of good schools. So obviously football is helping them keep focused. And as a result of that, between their brain and obviously their bronze, it's allowing them now to kind of take that next step into, using their talents into going to school and maybe getting a lot of money off for them, or to help them out financially a lot, or to get a scholarship, or just to get a really good education wherever they're going, especially schools like that. Jimmy, so you built your program up, I mean, from the ground up, and it's just an amazing story that you told. And, it's a lots and lots and lots of hours. And to me, the most amazing people in a head coach's life is their wife, their significant other, because they're the one who's there with you through all that stuff you said. And obviously what you're doing and meeting on your deck with your coaches, or meeting a ton in the off season, that's sacrificing time at home. So how do you balance life and wife, or football and wife, in making sure that you are balancing it?
Balancing it is it's an interesting term. It's extremely hard, especially with our schedule. At Kipp, we go to school until 3:45, and we don't get on our field until about 5:30. By the time we walk to the field, kids get their office hours in with teachers, so we don't get to the field until about 5:30. And obviously, when daylight savings pops around, we have to get lights at our field, so we're on the field until 8 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. And I think it's really important. The running joke with our kids is, if they walk back to the school too slow and don't change fast enough, I always joke with them and say, "Guys, my wife's going to divorce me. She wants me home by 9 o'clock at night." But it really says something that you find a partner. And my wife Lillian's been fantastic since I've started coaching, because even as a coordinator, when I met her, long hours as well.
Yeah.
But you need someone on your side. You need someone that understands, what you're doing, why you're doing it. And to support you. And Lil's been to all of our games. She's even driven by practice and beat the horn and waved. But you need someone that understands that, because there's a lot of nights where you're not coming home until 8, 9 o'clock at night after scouting, and you're potentially scouting at Neshoba 45 minutes away, or a South Shore team perhaps. That game's at 7, home till 10 o'clock at night, and that's 6 days a week. And then on football Sundays, you're watching football on Sunday. So even though you're home. So it's important to find someone who understands, who has that same care that you have. And Lil's been great with that. And, every banquet, that's my first line is, thank my wife for supporting me, because without that, we're doing it for family, and we talk about family in the football field. We break every day of practice. We put our hands in and say family on 3. And if you can't mirror that at home with family, then you're kind of not living up to your core values. So, family, faith, football, common theme. So having someone that understands that and is with you in that boat is super important. I'm lucky to have that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Lillian's great. I mean, beautiful, smart, so funny. Yeah, you're very lucky. And, and I think that, it's important that, and I brought this up to Serge last week too, that you understand that to hear coaches say that, because coaches at the end of the day, head coaches, when they say that, they mean that. And I think that that's important for their players to hear, their assistant coaches to hear, that you are mirroring to live your life the way that you're preaching to these kids all the time and being that influence on them. So it is a task for a head coach, but it's also a great way to live life. Amazing talking to you today. And I just think that, I want to end before we get to our final 2-minute drill segment is, what advice do you have for young coaches, coming into, whether it's trying to build a program, they're at a school right now that doesn't have any type of program, a basketball program, a football program, a tennis program, that they want to start it from scratch, or someone who's looking to make that climb like you did from assistant to coordinator to head coach. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think from the coaching front is to understand you don't know it all, and you're going to make mistakes, and to own those mistakes. And I listened to Serge talk. When I became offensive coordinator for him, it was a slow curve. It was 3 years of really learning. And if I go back to those films, I know I made a ton of mistakes, and we talked about those mistakes. So as a young coach in general, understanding if you're a positional coach, freshman, JV, coordinator, understand you'll make mistakes. And just like you forgive kids for making mistakes, understand you have to take ownership over those mistakes, learn from them. Becoming a new head coach in the same realm is you can't do everything. You might think you know more. Maybe you do know more than you did when you were an assistant because you had more experience. Of course, you don't know everything, but you can't do everything. You have to surround yourself with coaches and work for athletic directors and administrators that can take things off your plate. Because I think if from year one, if I tried to do everything without my athletic director, without other coaches, you can burn out really fast and you can make mistakes because your mind simply can't, comprehend all the things you have to do in a football program, as you know. So my advice would be delegate, delegate, and trust. If you're going to hire coaches, trust them to do their job, not to micromanage, but also making sure that you have that conversation. If you see a coach that's potentially not working their kids hard enough, or maybe is running a drill that you don't think might work, or teaching a wrong technique, which happens, have that conversation. But also trust your coaches, and trust the community around you, trust the parents, trust the kids to do their jobs. And I think if you can delegate and trust those around you, I think you're in a good spot. And that's what I've learned, these last 3 years is you can't possibly do it all, and you can't possibly know it all. And always keep learning. I haven't missed a Gillette conference in quite a while.
Yeah.
Always learning. So there's always someone that knows something that you don't know, something you forgot, and just honing your skill always.
Yeah, and I think that's something that that I owe you a lot for in my coaching career, is that I felt like we really pushed each other in that department. We went to a lot of clinics together. We did a lot of webinars together. We did a lot of scouting together. We watched a lot of film together. So I totally 1,000,000% agree with what you're saying. You always want to grow. There's always room to learn, and there's always room to get better. So unbelievable stuff, man. Just listening to, I mean, we know each other on a personal level, but listening to you and just listening to you talk about this is it's unbelievable. I mean, it's what you've done in 3 years is a testament to who you are as a man, but also how lucky these kids are and how lucky the school is to have you and to have them watching it, and having you watch over the youth in the school. And it's amazing stuff. I'm really proud of you. And I mean that. I really am.
I appreciate that. And the one thing I'll say, that the most proud moment that I've had in coaching isn't the 9-3 season. It's watching in the hallways when football players, or now the visible players in the school, are leaders not only on the field, but in the classroom. We've had 0 ineligibilities in a year and a half,
Oh,
week to
wow.
week, year to year. And we've had minimal discipline problems at school. In fact, our players are the ones who are handling, those issues internally with their team. So that's the one thing that I'm more proud of, that kind of flies under the radar. It's just the men that they become in the building, the leaders in the school, in the community that they become. that usurps certainly wins and losses, even in a successful year like we had last year.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to get into our last segment here, our 2-minute drill. So I got 2 minutes. I'm going to try to pump out as many questions as I possibly can for you. And I do get one challenge. I do get a challenge in the field if I feel like I need you to explain more. I do have a question in mind that I think may get the challenge, but we'll see. We'll see. So I'm going to stop the clock. Let me get the clock going. And here we go.
All right.
Number you would prefer to wear?
Number 1.
Name the biggest victory you've had in your career.
I think it's winning the Division 8 North championship last year.
Excellent.
In our first victory, 1-1A.
What was the first play you called as a head coach?
Inside zone.
Of course. Now this one might get the challenge here. I know you have a coach on staff by the name of Bernard Lynch, and I know that you have a very good running back. So my question is, which running back would you prefer?
Oh man, I gotta go with my guy Daniel. Bernard was a
throw the flag. Go ahead. I'll give it to you.
Bernard was a terrific running back, as you know, and he ran for countless yards. But to see Daniel grow and progress, Daniel was a lineman his freshman year, and he came to us and talked to us and said, "Coach, I want to be a running back." And in my head, I'm like, "You can't be a running back. You're a backup lineman as a freshman. You can't do." In my head, and he's like, "I'm coach. I'm gonna work at it," and he didn't. And he was 1,800 yards or whatever it was last year, and I'm just so proud of him that I have to kind of stick with that. And he's got that power and speed. Bernard may have him in quickness. But power and speed, I think I give the nod to Daniel.
I always got to ask that one question.
Oh, yeah.
All right, clock is starting back up, and here we go. 4th and goal from the 3-yard line. What are you running?
I'm going to run a power inside zone behind my big offensive line, my big fullback, and Daniel.
Okay. In football, outside of Tom Brady, who do you think right now is the best quarterback in football?
I think we saw it last night. I think Russell Wilson.
Okay.
I know it's an unpopular decision with Mahomes and Jackson, but Russell Wilson is just magic.
If there was one thing you could do over in your head coaching career, what would it be?
I think I would have stuck to my guns a little more stringently in year 1.
Okay. And last question for you. Which player in your career do you think you scream their name out the most?
Alec Mattis, probably.
All right, you survived the 2-minute drill here. Jimmy, from the bottom of my heart, man, I am very proud of you. I think what you've done is very special, and I think that it's great that your story is getting out there and people really understand the hard work and dedication that you've put in to building a football program and to really pursuing something that is a passion of yours. And I think it's a great lesson for your players to hear this, and I think it's a great lesson for a lot of people to hear, especially a lot of coaches that are out there now. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. And we'll talk at some point. I'm sure real soon we'll have you back on here.
I appreciate the opportunity. The platform that you've given me in our program is something that can't be measured. So I appreciate everything you've done for me in my football career and also in my personal life. You've been a great influence on me as a man as well. So and I hope you understand that you mean a lot to me, and I really appreciate the time.
All right, buddy. Well, listen, we would love to have you back on at some point. I know football is starting up in February. We didn't really talk about it, but, I want to focus more on your program and what you've done because it's been amazing. So from Beyond X's and O's, this is Anthony Petrellis signing out. Till next time.